You're listening to Sax in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sax in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at saxinthebasement.com. Tough start to the show today. Beltin Bill Melton passes away. I think I met him once or twice at events. He was always very nice. I know he's one of my dad's favorite ball players. I never actually saw him play. Seems like anybody that really knew him really liked him. And he was a hell of a ball player. He's like that forgotten guy at third base, right? Whenever people are talking about who's a great White Sox third baseman, you get the argument of Joe Crede versus Robin Ventura. The older generation will say Bill Melton was pretty good.
Yeah, first guy to hit 30 home runs in a White Sox uniform. I mean, come on. Nothing to sneeze at by any stretch of the imagination. So in addition to being a legendary player, I remember him when he was doing pre and post game, and he was one of those guys that he'd tell you what was going on. Like, he was not a shill for what was going on the field. And
I never saw Bill Melton play baseball, and so for me to talk about it would be disingenuous. It makes sense to bring somebody in that actually watched him, and who had a better seat in the house than longtime White Sox organist Nancy Faust, who joins us on the line. How are you, Nancy?
Hey, Chris. I'm great. I'm very sad about Bill, of course, but great to talk to you.
Oh, I appreciate you jumping on. What was his walk-up music? Did you have a standard thing for him? Did you move it around? I know that's early on in your time with the White Sox.
It was very, very early on, Chris, and at that time it wasn't called walk-up music, but around the second year, which would be 1971, I was inspired to play songs that were suitable for names, only because Harry Carey made a point to focus on music that he heard out, and he'd say, oh, listen to playing something that reflects what I said, and with that, it kind of inspired me to do something for players as well as for just a broadcast that I was listening to. You know, in the beginning, I just heard Harry say something like, oh, this game is dragging on. So I might have played, kind of a drag. But then I transferred that over to players, and I started playing more things that could be appropriate for players, and Bill would be one of them. And I know that what I would have played for Bill would be, Won't You Marry Me, Bill? That was popular in those days. And I'm sure it reflected the feelings of many female fans, because he did have those movie star quality looks, and he had commanded quite a presence when he approached the plate. He was well loved by both males and females, but Won't You Marry Me, Bill would have been a good one, or Where Have You Been, Billy Boy, I suppose, something like that.
You talk about his good looks, and he's in this magazine, and you sent out the picture of it. I think you have this framed up in your home, the Chicago Tribune magazine Sunday edition, and you're on the cover tussling Bill's hair as it says Nancy Faust, the White Sox music lady, and you posted this right after the news came out of his passing. Tell me a little bit about that photo shoot and that picture in particular.
Well, I was very proud to have been on the cover of the magazine with two very high-profile players. I was asked to come down to Victor Skrebnevsky's studio, photography studio in Chicago by Genevieve Buck, who at the time was the fashion editor of the Chicago Tribune. She asked me to come down there and wear some fashionable clothing for the fashion section of the Chicago Trib. So I had no idea I'd be meeting Bill Melton and Wilbur Wood. It's the first time I ever met either of them, but they were there in the studio to have the shoots performed with me. So how exciting was that? And they were very good sports about it. Well, I'd say Bill Melton was a very good sport about it. Wilbur Wood wasn't too happy because he reported to my boss that the shoot was a little provocative and perhaps not suitable for the image of baseball in those days. Things have changed, of course. So, but my boss, Stu Holcomb, the general manager at the time, he was happy that we could get any kind of publicity in those days. So he championed what I did. The picture was posted on the cover of the magazine, and I was most proud. And of course, I have it framed, and I look at it every day in my music room.
It's a very cute picture, and Wilbur needs to kind of chill out. But that was a different time, I guess. But here's the thing: you go and you do this shoot, you get to meet Bill. You played in the in the ballpark for him when he came up. You posted a few times on social media after he passed. You obviously had good feelings about him. Anytime I hear anybody talk about him, they say he was a really nice guy. What were your thoughts of Bill Melton when you heard of his passing?
I guess I thought the same thing because I've heard so many stories, and I listened to his post and his pregame analysis, and he came across as just a no-nonsense guy, a booming voice, good looks, and just somebody that everybody liked to listen to and watch, and had a lot of respect for. And even think of the young people that never saw him play, and they only knew him as an analyst, and they loved him dearly then too. So I would say that he certainly was proficient, regardless if it was behind home plate or behind the microphone. He was well respected for decades. How many players can lay claim to something like that?
That's for sure. And you were pretty well respected as well. And any chance I'm going to hear you in the ballpark anytime in the future? I mean, I wish you were still there every single game.
Oh, you're so nice. Well, if they answer my suggestion, perhaps. But in the meantime, I am in Arizona right now, and the ballpark out here has Camelback Ranch has requested that I play for a game when the White Sox play the Chicago Cubs on March 7th. So I'll be back in action for a while there, and I'm excited about that, Chris.
That's awesome. Nancy Faust is going to be there for Sox Cubs in spring training, and you heard about it right here on Sox in the Basement. Thank you so much, Nancy, for jumping on and talking about Bill Melton. It's always wonderful to sit down and talk with you.
Oh, Chris, thanks for your interest, and my condolences to Bill's family and all the fans that loved him so much. If you heard him, you had to love the guy.
Proud to announce that just yesterday, Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest committing to another year of supporting Sox in the Basement and bringing the best in exterior windows, doors, patio doors, and storm doors to Sox in the Basement listeners and all of the South Side. No high-pressure sales at Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. They are not in your kitchen. You're in their showroom. Full examples, glass designs on display, no pictures in a book. The owner in showroom, and then there's one on site. That way you know it's going to get done right. With all of their own installers, they don't farm out the work. They've been doing it this way for over 40 years and in Oak Forest since 1985. All major brands are custom made, no stock items for a perfect fit. Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest, located a half block east of 159th and Ridgeland at 6280 159th Street. See more at windowdooroakforest.com. The Sox nerd on this episode later on. He's on each and every weekend on Sox in the Basement. I guarantee he will talk more about Beltin Bill Melton. We look now at what's going on with this team, and we look at what the buzz is right now around Major League Baseball, and everybody's just trying to find something to talk about every day because nothing's really happening when it comes to the trade market, and Juan Soto's kind of bottlenecked the higher up part of free agency. So then we get the same rumors about the team, right? Luis Robert Jr., they'd like to move him, but again, the price is high. Garrett Crochet, they want to move, they expect to move, and every once in a while you get a new team that's involved, like the Cubs now rumored to be involved, the Reds rumored to be involved. I still think it's going to be the Red Sox. It just seems to be the team that has the most amount of smoke. The Boston Strong Twitter page talking about how Jim Bowden suggesting that if the Red Sox offer Wilder Abreu, Tristan Casas, and Connor Wong, the White Sox would make the move for Garrett Crochet. And it's interesting to watch the fan replies in Boston. They're like, no, that's terrible. He's not worth it. We would never do that. And then you get people on the White Sox side who are like, I don't know if there's enough control. Right? Like, I don't know. I don't know if that's exactly what we want. And that's the funny thing about trade rumors. Like, nobody likes the idea. Like, you hear the rumor and one team's like, yeah, we would never do that. And the other team's fan base is like, yeah, we would never do that. But in reality, that's a pretty solid offer for Garrett Crochet. That would be a very interesting return for Garrett Crochet. That probably is in the wheelhouse of what's going to happen if they move Garrett Crochet. And we're just sitting around. I mean, look, you see Luis Severino sign with the A's. The A's gave him 3 years and $67 million.
They don't even have a city to their name, and yet they can find 3 years and $67 million for Luis Severino.
Right. Look at the price tag for pitching, and look at Crochet's first half, and understand he's going to be able to pitch deeper in the games, and teams know that. And look at the fact he's going to be worth about $2 million a year, while Luis Severino's getting well over $20 million. And Crochet is probably a better investment for a team. And you have to ask the question, one, why are we trading Garrett Crochet? Because we're not going to be able to go out and afford Garrett Crochet on the open market. So that means, as a team, the White Sox philosophy in moving Crochet is we are always going to develop our own talent. There's going to be massive turnover with our pitchers because it's going to be very hard to keep up when a middle-of-the-road pitcher is getting that kind of money. And that's where Severino is coming off the injury until he proves otherwise. He's not the dominant force that he was before. If he's getting that money, and you've seen some other guys, like Frankie Montas, got money
2 years and $34 million. Yeah, he got
no
17
sense.
a year.
That made no sense. 2 years and $34 million for that guy. That makes no sense. So if that's what the price tag is for pitching early on in free agency, Garrett Crochet is worth those three names. I'm sorry, Red Sox fans. He is. He's worth a lot of names because he comes in at a low price and he can help a team win a championship. He's going to be in the top end of your rotation. And Chris Getz must smile when he sees the deal that just came through today with Luis Severino. He must smile because those kind of deals strengthen his position as the guy that's like, I have him, a lot of you want him, and I'm holding him with my price.
Yeah, and the idea that someone is going to offer three pre-arb players who have shown some ability at the major league level for Garrett Crochet should have White Sox fans excited, not skeptical. Because, if you're sitting there going, well, they've got better prospects than those three guys. Yeah, they've got prospects, but you don't know if those guys are going to make it in the majors. Remember, they had the best prospect in baseball when we traded Chris Sale to them, and we saw how that turned out. So all you can do at this point is just sit there and think to yourself, okay, this is what is going to happen. Garrett Crochet is going to go out on the open market. But you're right. When you're looking at mid-level pitchers, guys that are back end of the rotation at best these days, Frankie Montas is not anyone's ace. Luis Severino is not an ace anymore. When you look at those guys getting bigger dollars and getting them from the places like the A's of all teams, then these competitors and the Red Sox really must feel like they're in a position to compete. They have their sights set on Juan Soto. They still have Rafael Devers. They still have a bunch of young players and young talent that they're working through their system. They had a pretty decent rotation last year. It wasn't great. But for them to sit there and say, we added Juan Soto and Garrett Crochet, that's sight set on the AL East. That's sight set on a deep run to the World Series. And Crochet is as big a part of that as Soto would be, if not bigger, because you need that front end of the rotation guy. From the White Sox standpoint, if I get three young Major League ready players back for him, I'm happy to do that. I mean, if the Reds were to trade for him, I would expect, instead of looking at what are the Reds' prospects, I would be asking who in the Reds' current rotation is coming back as part of the Crochet deal.
The Cubs one is the one that's most interesting to me.
Yeah, the Cubs are an interesting team.
You see the immediate reaction from some fans like, well, we can't trade with the Cubs, right? We can't trade with the Cubs. Well, why not? The last time we traded with the Cubs, we traded Quintana to get Eloy Jimenez and Dylan Cease. And even though Jimenez may not have worked out the way we wanted to, Dylan Cease is a hell of a pitcher. That like I'll make a trade with the Cubs. I don't know why they need him. They've got so many left-handed pitchers, but you know what they have? They have exactly what we've been talking about now for the last year. What Chris Getz wants and what he should be asking for from teams for a quicker turnaround while dealing away a guy like Garrett Crochet. And that's at the major league level, new prospect, or AAA level prospect. 8 of their players, the top 8 players on their top 30 list on MLB Pipeline, are in the top 100 overall list. The Cubs have a lot of prospects that are not only highly ranked, but are sitting at AAA or already had a taste of the major leagues. Matt Shaw would be an interesting pickup. You all the way down. You could pick an infielder, an outfielder, get Alcantara if you wanted to. If the Cubs are really interested for some reason in getting a Garrett Crochet, the list of the guys that they have that are prospects that are right at the cusp, which is what the Sox want, they actually match up amazingly with the White Sox. It all comes down to whether or not the ownership groups, the front offices, can live with the idea that they're going to make a deal with each other that will be looked at by both fan bases for years and years to come. But I think after the Quintana and Jimenez/Cease deal, where everybody, I mean, you even had Benetti going, thanks, Cubs, which then got made fun of later when Eloy Jimenez was always injured, right? But when you watch that deal, I think both front offices, if they're using their brains, would sit there and say, okay, you never know how a trade's going to turn out. You can't be afraid to if you match up well with a trade partner to make a deal. Because what may look like a win for one team in 1 year, 2 years later, it might look like a win for the other team. The moment I would hear that Garrett Crochet has been dealt to the Cubs, I would be so excited waiting for what the return is, just looking at what they have to offer.
Well, and let's think about Eloy Jimenez for a second. Pre-chest injury Eloy Jimenez. Okay, I'm not talking about the little hamstring strains and the soft tissue BS that he was constantly putting up with. I'm talking about that pectoral muscle rip that people were legitimately worried was going to sabotage his power and make him into a very pedestrian hitter, which it appears to have done. Okay, up until that point, you can't tell me that Eloy Jimenez wasn't a guy that you wanted in the lineup. You and I sat here when Eloy Jimenez, before he got injured, talking about how we felt like he was maybe even in some ways a more reliable hitter than Luis Robert Jr. was going to be because he seemed to have that it factor, that clutch factor within him. Injuries ruin that guy. That could happen. I don't care who you trade for. I don't care where they fell on a prospect list. If an injury happens, something catastrophic to a guy that just absolutely torpedoes his career, then you can't grade the trade based on that. But yeah, the return of Cease and what Jimenez should have been if he hadn't been stupid about the way he played the outfield was brilliant for Jose Quintana. And for Quintana's part, he didn't expect him to be on the struggle bus as much as he was with the Cubs, and he started to kind of fall out. I mean, at the time when he was traded, you can't tell me he wasn't one of the most reliable left-handed starters in baseball and a guy that absolutely was what the Cubs needed. I mean, that was a win-win trade on paper.
I mean, it was a great trade, and then you look at what's available, right? I mean, like I said, the 6 of their prospects that are on the top 100 MLB prospect list through MLB Pipeline, 6 of them are at AAA or the taste of the major league level, and 5 of those 6 are position players. And what do we keep saying? They need major league ready bats.
Position players.
They need major league ready bats that are close. That's what you want to get back in your packages, right? Like that's the only thing that would make me happy. That would make me excited. You trade Garrett Crochet and you give me back, a couple of AA players and a rookie ball guy that's got a high ceiling, and I'm just going to be disgusted. And so that's why I like the names that you see from all these teams. Every time you hear a rumor, at least they all seem like they're the type of player that we've described that they have to go out and get and what you think that Chris Getz wants to go get. Again, until it happens, it hasn't happened, right? You can have all the conjecture and all the hope in the world that they're going to make a deal. You can look at all these possible players that they could bring in, but it takes both teams wanting to do it and then one team bringing up the price enough to where the other team is sitting there waiting. Right now, he just sits in the catbird seat. I don't know. My prediction is they go through the entire winter meetings and they don't trade Crochet. Because I think that Getz is stone cold in the offseason. He's not as good at it when the trade deadline's coming and he feels like he has to move a guy. But I think he's going to hold him as close as he can until somebody bites, just like he did with Dylan Cease.
Yeah, well, because again, what's the worst case scenario for him? A trade never forms, never really reaches the level of what he wants to get back for the guy. And the White Sox start the year with Garrett Crochet as their opening day starter, and they start the year with Luis Robert Jr. as their opening day center fielder. I mean, oh no, how terrible. How could we ever live that way as White Sox fans, to have a legitimate ace and a guy who at least potentially should be a superstar center fielder on our team? The hustle and hurry to trade is really just, there's such a bad taste in the mouth of White Sox fans, I think, that we want to see anything happen. And if nothing's going to come in off of the free agent market, nothing real is going to come in off the free agent market, then these trades kind of remain our best last hope for us to get something better and brand new. And it's just one of those things where I think if you're sitting there salivating over the idea of what you can get, you do start to get greedy, right?
music means only one thing. We take a quick break from trade talk and we get to the Sox nerd, Dave Marin, the guy that puts all those tidbits and trivia notes up on the board at the rate. And he's brought to you by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience a downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventure? Visit the Village of Lamont. Shop, dine, drink, explore, and see everything they have going on this holiday season at lamontdowntown.com. Nerd, what do you got for me?
Chris, the Sox nerd mourns the passing of the great Bill Melton, who died Thursday. Beltin Bill would undoubtedly be a first-ballot White Sox Hall of Famer if there was such an institution. Melton, a third baseman, played for the White Sox between 1968 and 1975. He was the first true consistent power hitter in Sox history, which endeared him to so many in the Southside family. The native of Gulfport, Mississippi, ended his Sox career as the franchise all-time leader with 154 home runs. He is currently ninth on that list. Melton was deservedly named to the White Sox All-20th Century team and was the club's representative at the iconic 1971 All-Star Game. Unfortunately, he did not see action in that game for the ages in Detroit. Melton served notice he would be a thumper in his first full big league season of 1969. On June 24th of that campaign, Bill belted 3 home runs in 3 consecutive bats in a 7-6 win over the Pilots in Seattle. He was the only player to hit 3 home runs in a game at Seattle's Sick's Stadium. The peak of Melton's career was in 1970 and 1971 when he hit 33 home runs in each season. The total in 1971 made him the first Sox player to lead the American League in homers, which was quite a feat considering he played half of his games in cavernous Comiskey Park. Getting that home run title was such a big deal that manager Chuck Tanner hit Melton in the leadoff spot the final 2 days of the 1971 season just to get him a few more at-bats. The strategy paid off as Melton hit 3 bombs in the final 2 games to claim the crown. By the way, those were the only 2 starts he made in the top spot in his career. The next season, things started to go south for Melton. He was limited to 57 games and none after June 23rd in that Renaissance season of 1972 because of a back injury. General manager Roland Heeman was steadfast in his belief that the 72 Sox would have gone to the World Series if it weren't for Melton's injury. Melton played the next 3 seasons for the Sox but never regained the thunder he had in 70 and 71. Heeman dealt Melton to the Angels in a trade that netted the Sox Jim Spencer after the 1975 season. He played 2 years with the Angels and 2 with Cleveland before calling it quits. Melton's final at-bat was a strikeout at Comiskey Park, where he is the Sox leader with 88 home runs on August 30th, 1977 for Cleveland. Melton's final at-bat was a strikeout at Comiskey Park on August 30th, 1977 for Cleveland. Melton, by the way, is the Sox leader with 88 home runs at Comiskey Park. In his retirement, Melton worked Sox broadcasts where he was kind of a pioneer doing in-game reports from the field. Above it all, though, Bill was a nice, friendly, gregarious man who had time for everyone. The tributes from every precinct of Sox Nation have been so genuine and so heartfelt. One came from Jerry Bilek on my X account, who summed up Melton's legacy perfectly. Beltin Bill was a huge star to us Sox kids growing up in the 1970s, Bilek posted. There's an old saying that says, you don't want to meet your heroes. It didn't apply to Bill. I met him many times in his role as White Sox ambassador. Just a great guy to talk to. Melton was one of my first heroes, as the childhood drawings of him my late mother kept demonstrated. I'll post this on my X account where you can find more of my material. Melton was also the starting third baseman in the first game I ever attended on August 29th, 1970 at Comiskey Park. My zinger? Not a zinger so much as a hope. Chris, hopefully next week at this time we are talking about Hall of Famer Dick Allen. We will learn the Cooperstown fate of the deserving Sox legend on Saturday. That's it, Chris. R.I.P. Beltin Bill Melton.
So now, also on Thursday, MLB.com put out the one burning question for each team at the winter meetings. We've talked with Scott Merkin about these kind of articles before. Merk's been on this show before, and he'll get contacted by his bosses at MLB.com, and he's the beat reporter for the White Sox, and he said, hey, we need your answer to this question. What's the one burning question? And then write up a little blurb. And they do that to everybody that's a beat reporter. So every beat reporter with every team that works for MLB.com gets asked this question. And he has something that he believes or that he's heard about, and he throws it out there. And sometimes you get some really interesting little nuggets. Well, Merck answered this question with, who will remain from the previous core? Which, that's a Merck one right there, right? That there was even a core, because there is no core. They're just a mishmash of just crap. But okay, the previous core.
I mean, you can have a core of crap. This is what was mashed together at the middle of everything.
Core of crap. I'm going to read it, and I know that when I get towards the end, you're going to hear something, and it's going to perk your ears up if you haven't read this already. The focus remains, this is Merck's little blurb, focus remains on young talent acquisition during year 2 of this latest rebuild for the Southsiders. But with free agency not being a major focus, they will use some of their current core via trades to make those additions. Left-handed starter Garrett Crochet, the American League Comeback Player of the Year, has garnered the most trade talk to date, and while it's tough to deal away a 25-year-old ace with 2 years remaining of contractual control under arbitration, he'll also generate the biggest return. A trade of Crochet has to have that effect within the context of the White Sox future hopes. Center fielder Luis Robert Jr. and first baseman Andrew Vaughn could also be on the market. General Manager Chris Getz will be in intent listening mode, but won't force anything just to make a move at the winter meetings. The Andrew Vaughn thing. If they gave him $6 million in arbitration because they think he's valuable enough that they can move him for something, they have made a terrible mistake.
Oh, my goodness.
Because what you did was you overpaid by the standards of the market itself for a guy who is absolute replacement level. And you're going to give him $6 million in arbitration, and you can go get that player off the scrap heap in March that can produce what Andrew Vaughn has produced. So that, like, up until this point, I believe they brought back Andrew Vaughn because Ryan Fuller was like, I could do something with this, and he's your hitting guru, right? I might not agree with it, but you thought that was the thought process. Merck's blurb tells you that somewhere along the line, he has heard that they would shop him, because they actually believe he's valuable enough to bring something back. But he's not. And he's even less valuable at that price, which is an overpay. That's why you would have non-tendered him. So what you're saying is you made the decision to bring a guy back and pay him more money than he was worth, and then you want to put him on the trade block? Like, that's what I gather from just that little thing. This is what I do in the offseason, Ed. I look at blurbs, I look at articles, I read them intently, and you find a throwaway line and you go, whoa, hold on a second, what? I know you were shopping Luis Robert Jr. and your price is high, but you actually brought back Vaughn and he could be on the market? What market? Who's picking him up on the market? Who's paying that price? That's weird to me.
Yeah, that idea just doesn't seem to have any real legs, because if Vaughn had a market at all, the trade deadline last year seemed to be the time that you would do it, because you're giving him an opportunity to make an impact for a team down the stretch, and then they could make the determination this year about what they want to do with him long term, and do they want to give him the money? Is he worth it? Doing this in the offseason,
it's an overvaluing by the home team.
Yeah.
It's the team that drafted him saying he's really good. You people just don't see it. And the rest of baseball's like, are you out of your mind? It's the same thing with Luis Robert Jr., right? Like, I believe Luis Robert Jr. is a talented, gifted player who, when he is giving his best effort, can hit 40 home runs, steal 40 bases, play amazing defense, and be a difference maker for your team that should be batting in one of the top 3 spots in your order. That's what Luis Robert Jr. is. He's a valuable thing. He is Juan Soto light for somebody that doesn't get Juan Soto. I believe that. But if I'm the general manager of a Major League Baseball team and I look at what happened to him last year, there are red flags abound. Because where was that? He's always injured. He had, not last year, but the year before is when he showed what I just described as this really great player, but he didn't show that last year. He looks like the moment that things got bad, he gave up. He wasn't interested in giving his max effort. You can go look at film right now of him and his at-bats in the last couple of months where he's just waving the bat and can't wait to get back to the bench. So now you have to weigh, if I'm going to give up the prospects these guys are asking for, because they're treating him like he is Juan Soto light. They're treating him like he is the next best option if you don't get Soto. and that you're gonna have to pay through the nose with prospects. That's the reports of what the White Sox believe. You're gonna have a hard time finding a general manager that's gonna sit there and put his job really on the line, dealing off that price. He's gonna deal off that price, hoping that 2 years ago is what he is, and that Robert will stay healthy and not get down in the dumps again and do what he did in the back half of last year if the going gets tough all of a sudden. That's a hard ask. It's a hard ask for Robert, and it may be equally a hard ask at a lower price because Vaughn he costs less, but he's also less talented, and he's never had a year like Robert Jr., and now you're putting him out in the trade market. What do you think you're going to get for him? You're trying to convince somebody of his draft pedigree. Well, how does that conversation go? Look, he's a really talented guy. We just screwed him up, but you can fix him. We like this prospect. Is that the conversation? Does that work? It doesn't seem like that wouldn't work in my fantasy baseball league, Ed.
Socks in the basement. Socks in the basement. Socks in the basement.
Socks in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on socksinthebasement.com.